My name is Elena Harrington. I'm the founder and CEO of Meridian Capital, a venture fund that manages $340 million across 12 states. I built it from nothing, just a laptop, a studio apartment in Chicago, and a vision I refused to let die. But this story isn't about how I made my money. It's about what I found written next to my name, in a place I was never supposed to see. After I became a millionaire, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind that comes from being alone. I'd known that silence for years. This was different, thicker, deliberate. The kind that fills a room when people have decided, collectively, not to say something. It started at a private equity summit in Manhattan. The Peninsula Hotel, 23rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue, where the city glittered like a promise that had already been kept. I was wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored black trousers. Understated, expensive, invisible, in the way powerful women learn to be. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about emerging markets. My fund had just closed a Series B round for a biotech startup that would go on to change early cancer detection. The press called me the woman with the golden instinct. Investors called me later, when no one else was listening. But that night, I wasn't thinking about deals. I was thinking about the list. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video, so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. I'd seen it 3 weeks earlier. Not intentionally, not because I went looking, but because I'd arrived early to a meeting, something I never do, and walked into a room I wasn't supposed to enter yet. The conference room was empty except for 2 men, both in their 50s, both wearing the kind of suits that whisper rather than shout. I recognized one, a senior partner at a firm I'd been courting for months. They didn't hear me come in. On the screen behind them was a spreadsheet. Rows and columns, names, all women. Next to each name, a single word or phrase. Compliant, cooperative, manageable, difficult. And then I saw mine. Elena Harrington, do not warn. I froze. The door clicked shut behind me, too late to pretend I hadn't entered. Both men turned. Their faces shifted in unison, from casual to cordial, like a mask sliding into place. Elena, the partner said smoothly. You're early. We were just wrapping up. The screen went dark. I smiled. The kind of smile I'd perfected over a decade of board meetings where I was the only woman in the room. No problem, I said. I'll wait outside. But I didn't wait. I left the building, walked 4 blocks in heels that weren't made for walking, and sat on a bench in Bryant Park until my hands stopped shaking. Do not warn. What did that mean? Warn me about what? And why had my name been categorized at all? That night at the Peninsula, I moved through the summit like I always did. Graceful, composed, magnetic without trying. I shook hands. I laughed at the right moments. I answered questions about market disruption and institutional bias with the kind of clarity that makes people lean in. But inside, I was scanning, watching, trying to figure out who else knew, trying to understand what I'd stumbled into. At the cocktail hour, a woman approached me, late 40s, elegant in the way that comes from old money, not new. Her name was Diane Carrington, a managing director at a fund twice the size of mine. I've been wanting to meet you, she said, her voice warm but measured. Your work is impressive. Thank you, I said. She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing something unseen. You remind me of myself, she continued. 10 years ago, before I learned how things really worked. There was something in the way she said it. A warning that wasn't a warning. A door cracked open just enough to see the darkness behind it. What do you mean? I asked. She smiled, took a sip of her wine. You'll figure it out, she said softly. or you won't." And then she walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my suite at the peninsula, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had in rooms like that one. Every deal I'd closed, every handshake that felt just a little too firm, every meeting where the terms shifted at the last second, and I was told it was just business. Do not warn. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't neutral. It was a label, a classification. And the fact that I'd seen it, accidentally, unintentionally, meant I'd crossed a line I didn't know existed. The question wasn't whether I was on the list. The question was, what happens to women who find out they are? My mornings had a rhythm. I woke at 5:30 a.m. in my penthouse in Lincoln Park, where the windows framed Lake Michigan like a painting that changed with the light. I made coffee in a French press. No assistants, no staff at that hour. Just me and the silence before the city woke up. I liked the quiet. It was the only time I didn't have to perform. By 6:15, I was at my desk, reviewing portfolios, scanning market reports, answering emails from founders in time zones where the sun had already set. My calendar was color-coded. My inbox was at 0 by 7 a.m. Control was how I survived in a world that constantly tested whether I deserved to be there. But after I saw the list, the rhythm fractured. I found myself pausing mid-email, staring at names in my contact list, wondering who else had seen it, wondering if the men I'd negotiated with, the ones who smiled and shook my hand and called me sharp, had checked a spreadsheet first to see how I'd been categorized. Do not warn. The phrase circled in my mind like a bird of prey. On a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after the summit, I received an email from a firm I'd been trying to partner with for 8 months. They were based in Boston, old money, old networks, the kind of institution that didn't just invest capital, they bestowed legitimacy. The subject line read, "Regarding our conversation." I opened it. The message was short, professional, cold. Dear Elena, after careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with other opportunities at this time. We appreciate your interest and wish you continued success. No explanation, no follow-up call, just a door, closed. I stared at the screen. We'd been in active negotiations. The terms were nearly final. The senior partner had told me himself over dinner at Number 9 Park that I was exactly the kind of mind they wanted to work with. And now, nothing. I picked up my phone, dialed his direct line. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. That afternoon, I had lunch with an old colleague, Marcus Chen, a partner at a private equity firm in San Francisco. We'd gone through business school together, stayed in touch over the years. He was one of the few people in this industry I actually trusted. We met at the Publican, a bustling spot in the West Loop where the noise gave us cover. Marcus ordered oysters. I ordered nothing. My appetite had disappeared weeks ago. "You look tired," he said, studying me across the table. "I'm fine." "You're not fine." I looked at him, weighed how much I could say. "Have you ever heard of internal lists?" I asked carefully. "Investor networks that categorize people?" His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "What kind of lists?" "Women, ranked or labeled based on, I don't know, behavior, reputation, how cooperative they are." Marcus set down his fork. He glanced around the restaurant, then leaned in slightly. "Where did you hear about this?" "I saw one." His jaw tightened. "Elena, what does do not warn mean?" He went very still. For a long moment, he didn't answer. The noise of the restaurant seemed to swell around us. Laughter, clinking glasses, the hiss of the open kitchen. But at our table, there was only silence. Finally, he spoke. "It means you're not supposed to know things before they happen." "What things?" "Terms changing, deals falling through, Opportunities closing. He paused. It means they've decided you ask too many questions. My stomach turned. And the women who aren't on that list? They get a heads up, a warning call, a chance to adjust before they walk into a room and get blindsided. I felt something cold settle into my chest. So it's a system. It's protection, Marcus said quietly. For some, and exclusion for others. And you knew about this? He looked away. I've heard things, rumors, but I've never seen proof. Until now. He met my eyes again, and I saw something there I didn't expect. Pity. Elena, you need to be careful. If they know you saw that list, if they think you're going to talk about it, what? What will they do? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I left the restaurant and walked along the Chicago River, letting the wind off the water cut through my coat. The city moved around me. Tourists taking photos, business people on calls, runners passing in tight athletic gear. Everyone with somewhere to be. Everyone certain of their place. I thought about all the deals I'd lost over the years. The ones that slipped away at the last second. The partnerships that dissolved without explanation. The rooms I was invited into, only to find the terms had already been decided before I arrived. I'd always thought it was part of the game, that I just needed to be smarter, faster, better. But what if it wasn't about skill at all? What if the game had already decided I wasn't supposed to win? That night, I sat in my penthouse with the lights off, staring out at the lake. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. You should stop asking questions. I stared at the screen. My hands went cold. I typed back. Who is this? No response. I waited. Nothing. I set the phone down on the glass coffee table and watched the screen until it went dark. Somewhere in this city, maybe in this building, someone was watching, and they wanted me to know it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple across the lake, my phone face down on the table like a loaded gun. Every sound in the apartment made me flinch. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant wail of a siren, the creak of the building settling into itself. You should stop asking questions. I'd built my entire career on asking questions. It was how I'd climbed out of obscurity, how I'd turned a $50,000 loan from a community bank into a fund worth hundreds of millions. I questioned assumptions. I challenged models. I pushed back when everyone else nodded and smiled. And now someone wanted me to stop. By morning, I'd made a decision. I would find out who sent that text, not because I was brave, but because the alternative, living in fear, second-guessing every move, wondering who was watching, was worse than any truth I might uncover. I started small. I went back through every deal I'd worked on in the past 3 years, every partnership that had fallen through, every meeting where the energy shifted inexplicably. I made a list of names, investors, partners, firms, and cross-referenced them with the companies present at that Manhattan summit. Patterns began to emerge. Certain names appeared again and again, not just in my failed deals, but in the portfolios of other women I knew. Women who'd been shut out of rooms they should have been invited into. Women who'd been told they were too aggressive or difficult to work with, despite having better track records than their male counterparts. Women who, I suspected, were also on that list. I reached out to 3 of them. The first was Jordan Mills, a fintech founder in Austin who'd raised $80 million before her Series C mysteriously collapsed. We'd met at a conference 2 years ago. I sent her a carefully worded email asking if she'd noticed anything unusual in her recent fundraising efforts. She responded within an hour. Can we talk? Not on email. We arranged a call for that evening. The second was Naomi Voss, a portfolio manager in Seattle who'd left a top-tier firm under circumstances no one would explain. I found her through LinkedIn, sent a direct message. No response. The third was Simone Lett, a former venture partner in New York who now ran her own boutique advisory. I'd heard through the grapevine that she'd been pushed out after raising concerns about ethical practices at her firm. She called me directly. "Elena Harrington," she said, her voice dry with something that sounded like amusement. "I wondered when you'd reach out. You know who I am? Everyone knows who you are. The question is, do you know what you're stepping into?" My throat tightened. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The list. I closed my eyes. "You know about it. I helped create it." The world tilted. "What?" Simone's laugh was bitter, sharp. 10 years ago, I was part of a working group. We were supposed to be addressing gender equity in venture capital, mentorship programs, transparency initiatives, all that. But behind the scenes, certain people were building a database, a way to track women in the industry, who was safe, who was manageable, who needed to be monitored. And do not warn? That's the classification for women who can't be controlled, women who won't play along, women who, if they knew what was really happening, might actually do something about it. I felt sick. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I tried," Simone said quietly. "That's why I don't work in venture capital anymore." That night, Jordan Mills called me. Her voice was tight, cautious. "I don't know what you're looking for," she said, "but I can tell you what happened to me. Please." She took a breath. My Series C was locked. We had commitments from 4 major funds. Terms were signed. All we needed was the final close. Then overnight, 3 of the 4 pulled out. No explanation, no negotiation, just gone. What did they say? That the market conditions had changed, that they needed to reassess their priorities. But Elena, nothing had changed. Our metrics were stronger than ever. We'd just signed 2 enterprise clients. Everything was perfect. And the 4th fund? They stayed in. But they renegotiated the terms at the last second, cut our valuation by 40%, said it was take it or leave it. Did you take it? I had no choice. My board was breathing down my neck. My employees needed to be paid, so I took it. And 6 months later, I found out that the partner who renegotiated, he'd been in a private investor group with the 3 funds that pulled out. My pulse quickened. They coordinated, she confirmed. And when I tried to raise a Series D this year, same thing. Meetings that went nowhere, promises that evaporated. And then someone told me, off the record, that I had a reputation for being difficult. "Are you?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I asked for fair terms. I questioned a clause that would have given away our IP. I said no to a board seat for an investor with a history of misconduct. She paused. Apparently, that makes me difficult. I thought about my own deals, the ones that had slipped away, the Boston firm that ghosted me, the partnership in Denver that fell apart after I questioned their valuation model, the meeting in San Francisco where I was told, very politely, that I wasn't the right cultural fit. I'd internalized every failure, turned it inward, wondered what I'd done wrong. But what if I hadn't done anything wrong? What if the system was designed to make me think I had? Late that night, I stood at my window, looking out over the city. Somewhere in those buildings, in corner offices and conference rooms and private lounges, men were making decisions about my future, about my reputation, about whether I deserved a seat at tables I'd earned the right to sit at. And they were doing it in rooms I would never be invited into. I thought about my father, a machinist who worked 60-hour weeks and died at 53 with nothing to show for it. but a pension that barely covered his funeral. He used to tell me that if I worked hard enough, if I was smart enough, I could go anywhere. He believed the world was fair. I used to believe it too. But fairness, I was learning, was a luxury afforded only to people who didn't threaten the system. And I had become a threat. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The breaking point came on a Thursday. I was in a conference room at a co-working space in River North, sitting across from two representatives from Titan Holdings, a New York-based fund with $4 billion under management. We'd been in talks for 6 months. They wanted to acquire a 30% stake in Meridian Capital. The deal would have doubled my valuation and given me access to networks I'd spent a decade trying to break into. This was supposed to be the final meeting, the closing conversation. The two men across from me were perfectly composed. Tailored suits, expensive watches, smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The older one, Stephen Caldwell, a managing partner, slid a document across the table. "We've made some adjustments to the terms," he said smoothly. I picked up the document. My vision blurred as I scanned the pages. They'd reduced the valuation by 35%, added a clause that gave them board control, included a non-compete that would prevent me from raising outside capital for 5 years without their approval. I looked up. "This isn't what we agreed to." "Market conditions," Stephen said, his tone apologetic but firm. "You understand. The market hasn't changed in the past 2 weeks. Nevertheless." I set the document down carefully, forcing my hands not to shake. "This is a completely different deal." The younger one, David Park, an associate I'd worked with for months, shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, we still believe in you, but we need protections, given certain concerns." "What concerns?" Silence. Stephen folded his hands. "We've heard feedback from other investors about your management style." The words landed like a slap. "My management style. You're very assertive," David said carefully. "Some people find it challenging to work with you." I stared at him. "I've closed 12 deals in 3 years. My portfolio companies have a 90% success rate. My fund has outperformed the market by 40%. My voice was steady, cold. "What exactly is challenging about that?" Stephen leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. "Elena, this is business. We're offering you a significant opportunity. But if you're not willing to be flexible," "Flexible," I repeated, "then perhaps we're not the right partners for each other." The room went still. I looked at both of them, at their carefully blank faces, at the document on the table that would strip me of everything I'd built. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about business. This was a test. They wanted to see if I would bend, if I would accept terms that were designed to diminish me, if I would smile and sign away my power because I was afraid of losing the deal. They wanted to see if I was manageable. I stood up. "We're done here." Stephen raised an eyebrow. "Elena, I said we're done." I picked up my bag, my pulse hammering in my ears. David started to say something, but I was already walking toward the door. "You're making a mistake," Stephen called after me. I stopped, turned. "No," I said quietly. "I made a mistake 6 months ago when I thought you were negotiating in good faith." I left. I made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking. I pressed the button for the lobby, watching the numbers descend, each floor a small eternity. When the doors opened, I walked out into the cold November air and kept walking until I reached the river. I stood on the bridge, gripping the railing, staring down at the dark water. I just walked away from millions of dollars, from legitimacy, from a deal that could have changed everything. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit in that room and pretend that what they were doing was normal. that it was just business, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to give away my power in exchange for their approval. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. I heard what happened. Call me. I didn't call. I turned off my phone and stood there as the wind cut through my coat, as the city moved around me, oblivious. When I finally went home, it was past midnight. My apartment felt emptier than usual. The silence pressed against my ears. I poured a glass of wine I didn't drink and sat on the floor of my living room, my back against the couch, staring at nothing. I thought about my mother. She'd died when I was 19, breast cancer, caught too late because she didn't have good insurance and kept putting off the doctor's appointments she couldn't afford. She'd worked 3 jobs, cleaned houses, waited tables, did data entry at night. She used to tell me, "You're going to do better than this. You're going to have a life where people respect you." I'd built that life. I'd earned that respect. Or so I thought. But respect, I was learning, was conditional. It lasted only as long as I stayed in my place, as long as I didn't ask the wrong questions, as long as I smiled and nodded and accepted that the rules were different for me than they were for men who'd accomplished half as much. Do not warn. I finally understood what it meant. It meant I wasn't worth protecting. It meant I was expendable. It meant that if I failed, if I was pushed out, if I lost everything, no one would tell me it was coming. No one would give me a chance to prepare. No one would offer me the courtesy of honesty. I would just disappear, like so many women before me. My phone, still off, sat on the coffee table. I knew what would happen when I turned it back on. Messages from investors, carefully distant. Emails from partners, suddenly unavailable. Meetings that would be rescheduled and then quietly canceled. The machine would close around me, and everyone would say it was my fault, that I was difficult, that I'd made bad decisions, that I just wasn't cut out for this level. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapped my arms around them. For the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not because I was giving up, but because I finally understood the cost of refusing to. I woke up on the floor. The wine glass was still full on the table. Morning light cut through the windows in sharp, unforgiving lines. My neck ached. My eyes felt swollen. I reached for my phone and turned it on. 43 notifications. I scrolled through them slowly, each one confirming what I already knew. A meeting postponed. A call canceled. An investor who'd been enthusiastic 3 days ago now saying he needed to reassess his portfolio strategy. The machine was already moving, but there was one message that stood out. From Diane Carrington, the woman from the summit. The one who'd told me I'd figure it out, or I wouldn't. If you're ready to understand, meet me. The Art Institute, Saturday, 2 p.m. Come alone. I spent Friday in a haze. I worked, because I didn't know what else to do. Reviewed financial models. Answered emails with a professionalism that felt like a mask I could barely keep in place. My team didn't know what had happened in that conference room. They didn't know I'd walked away from the deal that was supposed to secure our future. I didn't know how to tell them. Late in the afternoon, my CFO, Rachel, a woman I'd hired 4 years ago when no one else would take a chance on her, knocked on my office door. "You okay?" she asked. I looked up from my laptop. "I'm fine." She didn't move. "Elena, you've been staring at the same spreadsheet for an hour. You're not fine." I closed the laptop. Rachel stepped inside and shut the door behind her. She sat down across from me, her expression careful but concerned. "What happened with Titan?" I hesitated. "It fell through." "Why?" "They changed the terms at the last second, tried to gut the deal." Her jaw tightened. "And you walked." "I walked." She nodded slowly. Good. I blinked. Rachel, that was millions of dollars. That was our expansion plan. That was them trying to take everything you built and put their name on it. She leaned forward. I've seen this before. At my last firm. They did it to my boss, a woman who generated 60% of their revenue. They squeezed her until she had nothing left, then pushed her out and took credit for her work. What happened to her? She disappeared, left the industry. Last I heard, she was teaching economics at a community college. Rachel's eyes were steady on mine. You did the right thing. It doesn't feel like it. It never does. Not at first. Saturday arrived cold and bright. I took the L to the Art Institute, watching the city blur past the windows. Families with strollers, couples holding hands, people living lives that didn't require them to decode invisible systems or wonder if their success was real or just permitted. I envied them. Diane was waiting in the modern wing, standing in front of a Rothko. Bands of color so deep they seemed to vibrate. She wore a camel coat and leather gloves. Her hair was pulled back, elegant and severe. She didn't turn when I approached. Do you know what I see when I look at this? She asked. I stood beside her. What? Boundaries that don't actually exist. Just color and light, making you believe there's separation where there isn't. She turned to me. That's what they've done to us, Elena. Made us believe in boundaries that were never real. Who's they? The men who built this industry. The ones who decide who gets funded, who gets promoted, who gets access. She gestured to a nearby bench. Sit with me. We sat. Diane was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. I was 34 when I found out about the list, she said. Younger than you. I'd just made managing director. I thought I'd finally made it. Then I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Two senior partners, talking about which women were worth investing in, and which ones needed to be managed out. What did you do? I confronted them. She smiled bitterly. I thought honesty would matter. I thought if I showed them the evidence, if I made them see how wrong it was, they'd change. They didn't. No, they didn't fire me. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they froze me out, stopped inviting me to key meetings, gave my accounts to junior partners, made it clear that my career had a ceiling. She looked at me. So I made a choice. I could fight a system designed to crush me, or I could learn to navigate it. You stayed quiet. I survived, she corrected. And now I run one of the most successful funds in the country. I have influence, resources, the ability to change things from the inside. Have you? Changed things? Diane's expression flickered, something like regret, or maybe shame. I've helped women when I can, quietly, without making waves. I've opened doors that would have stayed closed. But the list still exists, yes. And women are still being categorized, yes. So nothing's actually changed. Diane turned to face me fully. You want to fight this, don't you? I met her eyes. I want to burn it down. She studied me for a long moment. That's what I thought when I was your age. That righteous anger. I remember it. Her voice softened. But Elena, you need to understand what you're up against. This isn't just one firm or one group of men. It's an entire ecosystem. Investors who've worked together for decades, lawyers who protect them, PR firms that bury stories. If you try to expose this, they won't just come after your career. They'll destroy your reputation. They'll make sure no one ever takes you seriously again. So I should just accept it? Smile and play along? I'm not saying that. Then what are you saying? Diane reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. I'm saying you need to know exactly what you're fighting. She pressed it into my hand. This has everything. Names, firms, documentation going back 15 years. Women who were pushed out, deals that were sabotaged, a full accounting of how the system works. My fingers closed around the drive. Why are you giving this to me? Because I didn't have the courage to use it. Her voice cracked slightly, and I've regretted it every single day since. I left the museum with the flash drive in my pocket, its weight somehow heavier than it should have been. I walked through Millennium Park, past the Bean, past tourists taking selfies and children running across the lawn. The sky was impossibly blue. The world kept turning. And I realized something. I'd spent my entire life trying to prove I belonged, trying to be good enough, smart enough, strategic enough to earn a place at tables where men were simply born with a seat. But I would never be enough. Not because I wasn't capable, but because the game was designed to make sure I lost. The question was no longer whether I could win. The question was whether I was willing to change the game entirely. I didn't open the flash drive right away. I carried it with me for 3 days, feeling its presence in my pocket like a secret that burned to be told. I went through the motions of work, calls, emails, portfolio reviews, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept thinking about Diane's face in the museum, the regret etched into her expression, the quiet shame of someone who'd chosen survival over truth. I didn't want to become her. But I also didn't want to destroy myself for a battle I might not win. On Tuesday evening, I finally plugged the drive into my laptop. I poured myself a scotch, something I rarely did, and sat at my desk as the files loaded. There were folders, dozens of them, organized by year, by firm, by incident. I opened the first one. It was a spreadsheet, similar to the one I'd seen in that conference room, but more comprehensive. Hundreds of names, women across the industry. Next to each name, classifications, notes, recommendations. Cooperative, manageable, requires supervision, do not warn, do not fund, remove from consideration. I scrolled through the names, recognizing some. Women I'd met at conferences, women whose companies had inexplicably failed despite strong fundamentals. Women who'd left the industry and never spoken about why. I opened another folder. Email chains. Messages between partners at major firms, discussing which women to support and which ones to phase out. Conversations about deals being coordinated to fail. Agreements to lowball valuations. Strategies to isolate women who ask too many questions. One email made my blood run cold. It was from 5 years ago. A senior partner at a Boston firm, the same firm that had just ghosted me, writing to a colleague. Harrington is smart, but she's not a team player. Too many questions about our fee structure. Recommend we slow roll her and wait for her to make a mistake. Then we can move on to more cooperative options. 5 years ago. They'd been watching me for 5 years. I opened another folder. Legal settlements. NDAs signed by women who'd tried to speak out. Payouts to keep them quiet. Carefully worded press releases about mutual decisions to part ways and pursuing other opportunities. I read for hours. The scotch sat untouched. By the time I closed the laptop, it was past midnight, and I understood something I hadn't fully grasped before. This wasn't about me. It had never been about me. I was just one name on a list that stretched back decades. One woman in a system designed to keep us all in check. The question was, what was I going to do with that knowledge? The next morning, I called Marcus. I need your advice, I said. We met at a quiet cafe in Wicker Park, tucked into a corner booth where no one would overhear us. Marcus looked tired, older than I remembered. You look like you haven't slept, he said. I haven't. I told him everything. The flash drive, The files. The evidence of a coordinated system spanning years and firms and millions of dollars in sabotaged deals. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "What do you want to do?" he finally asked. "I want to expose it." "Elena, I know what you're going to say, that it's career suicide, that they'll destroy me, that I should think about my team, my investors, my reputation." I leaned forward. "But Marcus, if I don't do this, if I take this information and bury it because I'm afraid, then I'm part of the problem." "You're not part of the problem. You're trying to survive it. Survival isn't enough anymore." He rubbed his face, exhaling slowly. "Okay, let's say you go public with this. You write an article, you go to the press, you name names. What happens next?" "They can't deny it. The evidence is there." "The evidence is there," he agreed. "But do you know what else they have? Lawyers, PR teams, powerful friends in media who will bury the story or spin it so you look like a disgruntled entrepreneur with an axe to grind. They'll dig into your past. They'll find every mistake you've ever made and magnify it. They'll make you the story instead of the system. So I should just let them win?" "I'm not saying that." His voice softened. "I'm saying you need to be strategic. If you're going to do this, you can't do it alone. You need allies, other women who are willing to come forward, journalists who can't be bought, legal protection. And if I can't find those things?" Marcus met my eyes. "Then you need to decide if you're willing to lose everything for the chance, not the guarantee, the chance that something might change." I spent the next week reaching out. I contacted the women whose names were on the list. Some didn't respond. Some asked me to never contact them again. Fear in their voices. Or maybe just exhaustion. A few agreed to talk, but only off the record. Jordan Mills was the first to say yes. "I'll go on record," she said. "I have nothing left to lose. They already took everything." Naomi Voss, the portfolio manager from Seattle, called me back after a week of silence. "I'm in," she said simply. "Someone needs to say it." Simone Lett, the woman who'd helped create the list, sent me a long email. "I've carried this guilt for 10 years. If you're ready to do this, I'll testify to everything I know. It's time." One by one they emerged. Women who'd been silenced. Women who'd been pushed out. Women who'd been told their failures were their own fault when the truth was, the game had been rigged from the start. I compiled their stories, their documentation, their evidence. And I reached out to a journalist I'd met years ago, a woman named Reese Callahan, who worked for a national investigative outlet. She'd built her career on exposing institutional corruption. We met in her office in downtown Chicago, a small space cluttered with papers and coffee cups and the controlled chaos of someone who lived for the truth. I handed her the flash drive. "This is everything," I said. She plugged it in, started reading. Her expression changed as she scrolled, disbelief giving way to anger, then to something fierce and focused. After 20 minutes, she looked up. "This is real." "Yes." "You understand what happens if we publish this?" "Yes." "They'll come after you, hard." "I know." Reese studied me. "Why are you doing this?" I thought about my mother, about the women whose names I'd read on that list, about every deal I'd lost and every room I'd been shut out of, about Diane's regret and Rachel's anger and the flash drive that had burned in my pocket for days. "Because I'm tired of surviving," I said. "I want to win. And if I can't win, I want to make sure the next woman has a fighting chance." Reese nodded slowly. "Give me 2 weeks. I'll verify everything, build the story, make it bulletproof." She extended her hand. This is going to change things, Elena." I shook her hand. "I hope so." I left her office and walked out into the cold December air. The city glittered around me, lights strung between buildings, holiday decorations in shop windows, people rushing past with shopping bags and plans and lives untouched by the weight I'd been carrying. I pulled out my phone. There was one more message I needed to send. I opened my email and typed a short note to Diane Carrington. "I'm using it. Thank you for giving me the chance you didn't give yourself." I hit send. Then I stood on that street corner, feeling the wind cut through my coat, and for the first time in months, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Not hope, exactly, but clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you finally stop running from the truth and decide to face it head-on, no matter what it costs. The story would break in 2 weeks, and after that, nothing would ever be the same. The article published on a Wednesday morning. I was in my office when my phone started vibrating. Then it didn't stop. The headline read, "The List: How a Shadow Network of Venture Capitalists has systematically excluded women for over a decade." Reese had done exactly what she promised. The story was airtight. Names, firms, documentation, email chains reproduced in full. Testimonies from 15 women, including me. A spreadsheet with hundreds of names, women who'd been categorized, monitored, and systematically pushed out. And at the center of it all, the classification that had started everything: do not warn. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Twitter exploded. LinkedIn erupted. Major news outlets picked it up. The stock prices of 3 firms named in the article dropped by mid-morning. My phone rang constantly. Investors, reporters, other women I'd never met, thanking me, crying, telling me their own stories. But there were other calls too. Lawyers, threatening legal action. Former colleagues, furious that I'd betrayed the industry. Men I'd worked with for years, telling me I'd made a terrible mistake. One voicemail, from Stephen Caldwell at Titan Holdings, was particularly venomous. "You've destroyed your career, Elena. No one will ever work with you again. I hope it was worth it." I deleted it. The truth about Do Not Warn was both simpler and more insidious than I'd imagined. It wasn't just about identifying difficult women. It was about controlling information flow. In the world of high-stakes investing, timing is everything. Knowing when a deal is about to collapse, when terms are going to shift, when a market is about to turn. The men who built this system understood that knowledge was power, and they'd created a network where that knowledge was shared freely among themselves, and with women they deemed cooperative. But women like me, women who questioned, who pushed back, who refused to accept terms that diminished us, we were marked. Do Not Warn meant that when things were about to go wrong, no one would tell us. We'd walk into meetings unprepared, accept terms that had already been decided, sign deals that were designed to fail. And when we did fail, when our companies collapsed or our funds underperformed or our reputations suffered, everyone would say it was because we weren't good enough. Not because the game was rigged, not because we'd been deliberately sabotaged, but because we, personally, had failed. It was genius in its cruelty. A system that protected itself by making its victims believe they were the problem. 3 days after the article published, I received an email from Diane Carrington. "I saw what you did. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry I didn't have your courage when it mattered." I wrote back, "It's not too late." She didn't respond. But a week later, she resigned from her firm and issued a public statement acknowledging that she'd known about the list and had failed to act. She donated $10 million to a fund supporting women entrepreneurs. It wasn't enough to erase what had been done, but it was something. The fallout was swift and brutal. 2 senior partners at major firms were forced to resign. An investigation was launched by the SEC into potential collusion and antitrust violations. Several women came forward with lawsuits, Not just about the list, but about harassment, discrimination, and retaliation they'd endured for years. And my career? Stephen Caldwell was right about one thing. The industry I'd known. The rooms I'd fought so hard to be invited into. Those doors closed. Permanently. But other doors opened. Women I'd never met reached out, wanting to work with me. Founders who'd been shut out by traditional VC firms asked me to invest. A group of female investors approached me about starting a new fund, one built on transparency, equity, and a fundamental rejection of the old boys network. 6 months after the article published, I launched Elevation Capital. We raised $150 million in our first round, entirely from women and a handful of men who understood that the system needed to change. Our model was simple: radical transparency, open term sheets, no hidden networks, no lists, and a promise that if we invested in you, we'd tell you the truth, even when it was hard to hear, especially then. It's been 2 years now. I'm sitting in my new office, smaller than the old one, but with better light. Lake Michigan stretches out beyond the windows, and this morning the water is silver and calm. My team has grown. We've funded 23 companies, 18 of them led by women who'd been passed over by traditional investors. Our portfolio is outperforming the market. But that's not what I think about when I look back on everything that happened. I think about the women who reached out after the article published, the ones who said, "I thought it was just me. I thought I was the problem. I thought I was crazy." And I think about what I finally understood after I saw my name on that list. The system wasn't designed to keep me out because I wasn't good enough. It was designed to keep me out because I was. Because women like me, women who ask questions, who refused to accept less than we deserved, who built things that threatened the old power structures, we were dangerous. Not to the market, not to innovation, but to men who'd built their empires on keeping us in our place. Do Not Warn was never about protecting the system from bad actors. It was about protecting the system from women who might actually change it. And the moment I understood that, the moment I stopped trying to fit into a game designed for me to lose, I became truly powerful. Not because I had more money, not because I had a bigger platform, but because I finally stopped believing their lies about who I was and what I deserved. Last week, I received a letter. It was from a young woman, 25 years old, who'd just raised her first round of funding. She'd read the article. She'd followed my work. She wrote, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said. Because of you, I knew to ask the right questions. I knew not to accept terms that diminished me. I knew I wasn't crazy when things didn't add up. You changed the game for women like me." I keep that letter on my desk, because that's the real revelation. After I became a millionaire, I discovered my name on a list of women who should never be warned. But what I learned was this: the warning wasn't for me. It was for them. A warning that there were women who couldn't be controlled, women who wouldn't stay quiet, women who would burn down a system that tried to diminish them, even if it meant losing everything. And in the end, that was the most dangerous thing I could be. Not a woman on their list, but a woman who refused to let the list define her. The sun is setting over the lake now, painting the water in shades of amber and rose. My phone buzzes. Another founder asking for a meeting. Another woman ready to build something the old world said was impossible. I smile, and I get back to work. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.